Alright fellas, let's talk about the Eastern Front. And by front, I mean the moment World War II stopped being a war and started being a survival experiment. So it's 1941 and Germany is doing pretty well for itself. France is down, Europe is sweating, and Hitler looks at the Soviet Union and goes, yeah, I could take that. Thus begins Operation Barbarossa, which was basically Germany saying, let's invade the biggest country on earth real quick. The plan was simple. Blitz in, knock out the Red Army, take Moscow, be home by winter. Easy. In fact, the plan assumed the Soviet Union would just stop existing. At first, it kind of worked. German troops advanced fast, entire Soviet armies got surrounded, millions of prisoners were taken. Everyone in Berlin was feeling real confident. A little too confident. Because while Germany was busy celebrating lines on a map, the Soviets were doing this crazy thing called not collapsing. Factories packed up and moved east, new soldiers kept showing up, losses horrific but replaceable. Meanwhile, German supply lines were stretching so far they basically needed their own passports. Then winter showed up. Again, somehow still a surprise. Tanks froze, guns jammed. Soldiers realized summer uniforms are not in fact winter coats. Meanwhile, Soviet troops brought skis, because of course they did. And then there was Stalingrad. What was supposed to be a quick grab turned into a citywide nightmare where entire units just disappeared into rubble. After that, Germany wasn't attacking anymore. It was just trying not to die faster than it already was. Next we have Western Front, also known as the part of World War II where everything happened very fast, then absolutely nothing happened, and then everything happened again all at once. Yeah, simple. So it's 1939 and Germany looks west and goes, alright France, round 2. France, meanwhile, is feeling pretty good. They've got the Maginot Line, a massive wall of concrete, guns, tunnels, and confidence, built to stop a German invasion dead in its tracks. The only problem is that the Maginot Line stopped exactly what it was designed to stop: Germany, coming straight at it. Instead, German forces just went around through Belgium and the Netherlands, which everyone politely agreed to be surprised by. Tanks rolled, planes screamed overhead, and France collapsed so fast it barely had time to process what was happening. The entire campaign was over in weeks. After that, the Western Front entered its next phase: waiting. Britain stood alone, getting bombed from the air and hoping Germany wouldn't feel like swimming across the Channel today. So for a few years, the West was mostly planes and submarines. Then, in 1944, the Allies finally said, alright, enough of this bullshit, and launched D-Day. Thousands of ships, planes everywhere, and soldiers storming beaches that were designed specifically to kill them. It was chaos, but it somehow worked. After that, Allies had an open road to Germany, and that's basically the end of the Western Front. Next up is the North African Front, basically the part of World War II where everyone realized that tanks are cool until they run out of fuel in the middle of a desert. So why North Africa? Simple. Control the Mediterranean, protect the Suez Canal, keep supply routes open, and maybe grab some oil while you're at it. Big strategic goals. Unfortunately, all of them required fighting a war in a place that actively hates human beings. This front was basically Britain versus Germany and Italy, with Italy showing up first, getting absolutely folded, and then Germany sending Erwin Rommel to save their asses. Rommel was good, like really good. Tactical genius, fast movements, clever maneuvers. The problem was that none of that matters if your supplies are stuck on boats getting sunk halfway across the sea. North Africa quickly turned into a cycle. One side advances, runs out of fuel, stops. The other side advances, runs out of fuel, stops. Rinse and repeat. Entire offensives were decided by who had fuel that week. Eventually, the Allies brought overwhelming numbers, better logistics, and the Americans showed up eager and very confident. Axis forces were squeezed from both sides, supplies collapsed completely, and by 1943, North Africa was done. If you are still here, please consider subscribing. It would mean a lot to me if we could hit that 1,000 subscribers mark. Thanks. Pacific Front. There are a lot of movies from that front, and my favorite one is Hacksaw Ridge. Do you have any favorite ones from that front? Type it in the comments. Okay, back to business. So Japan enters the war because it wants resources. Oil, rubber, raw materials, basically all the stuff you need if you plan on running an empire and a massive war at the same time. The idea was simple: expand fast, grab everything, and hit the United States hard enough that they decide it's not worth the trouble. On December 7th, 1941, they attacked Pearl Harbor. What followed wasn't one long front like in Europe. It was thousands of islands scattered across the Pacific, most of which were just rocks with palm trees and zero redeeming qualities. And yet every single one suddenly became strategically vital. Entire battles were fought so planes could land closer to the next miserable island. Naval and air power ran the show. If you lost your ships, you lost everything. Ground troops often landed after the real battle was already decided. However, that didn't make the fighting any easier. Japanese defenses were brutal. Surrender was basically not an option. The farther the war went, the more desperate it became. Japan kept fighting even when defeat was obvious, and the cost kept climbing. And at one point, Americans had enough, so they sent Enola Gay carrying the surprise for Hirohito. It was a destruction that humanity hasn't seen before. 3 days later, another one, and after that, Japan finally surrendered. Alright, next we've got the China-Burma-India front. Yeah, a long name for a front. This front actually starts before World War II even officially begins. Japan fully invades China in 1937 and just never really stops. By the time the rest of the world is fighting, China is already exhausted, bleeding, and still expected to keep going, and somehow it does. The problem was that this front was a logistical nightmare. There were jungles, mountains, rivers, monsoons, and approximately 0 roads. Supplying armies meant hauling equipment over terrain that whenever trucks looked at it, they said, nope. Coordination was also not great. Chinese forces, British units, and American advisors all had different priorities, different strategies, and very different ideas of how this war should be fought. Meanwhile, Japan was fighting hard, spreading itself thin, and committing atrocities that made this front one of the most horrific of the entire war. Fighting dragged on for years with no clean breakthroughs. Victories were local, losses were constant, progress was slow and expensive. This wasn't a front about big dramatic pushes. It was about endurance, survival, and not collapsing today. Alright guys, next we have the Italian front. So Italy enters the war on Germany's side, mostly to look important. That doesn't go great. By 1943, the Allies invade, Mussolini gets kicked out, and Italy switches teams mid-game. You'd think this would make things easier? It didn't. Germany immediately moved in and turned Italy into one giant defensive obstacle course. Italy is basically mountains, rivers, and narrow roads stacked on top of each other, which is awesome if you're defending, and absolutely miserable if you're attacking. Every hill had a machine gun. Every river had artillery pointed at it. Progress was measured in meters and casualties. The day was good if there were less casualties than the day before, even if that number was too big. Attack on Monte Cassino was a real tragedy. Multiple assaults, massive bombing, horrific losses, and the Germans just stayed. Turns out bombing a mountain into rubble does not remove the people defending it. Meanwhile, Rome sat there, very conquerable in theory and very annoying in practice. When the Allies finally broke through, it wasn't because of one brilliant maneuver. It was because Germany couldn't defend every line forever while also losing ground everywhere else. The Italian front drained German troops, time, equipment, and patience. It forced Germany to defend ground it didn't even want. While the Allies learned a valuable lesson, uphill fighting against prepared defenders is not very fun. The Scandinavian front. So Scandinavia mostly wanted to sit this one out. Norway was neutral, Sweden was neutral, Finland just wanted to exist in peace. Unfortunately, Germany really liked Swedish iron ore, and that iron ore happened to pass through Norway. And once Germany decided it needed something, neutrality became more of a suggestion. In 1940, Germany invaded Norway. Not because Norway was threatening anyone, but because shipping lanes and resources are apparently very motivating. The invasion was messy, chaotic, and involved naval battles in freezing fjords, airborne troops landing wherever they could, and everyone realizing that fighting in snow while carrying heavy gear is deeply unpleasant. Finland's situation was even weirder. The Soviet Union attacked first in the Winter War, assuming Finland would collapse instantly. It did not. Finnish forces fought back with skis, local knowledge, and pure spite. The Soviets eventually won on paper, but at a cost that made everyone uncomfortable. Later, Finland fought alongside Germany against the Soviets, not because they loved Nazis, but because geopolitics makes strange, awkward friendships. This front was less about massive armies and more about environment. Cold killed people. Snow slowed everything. Vehicles froze. Supplies vanished. Strategy was constantly adjusted based on whether soldiers could feel their fingers. Turns out, winter came out of it as a true winner. Alright fellas, next we've got the Balkan front. So the Balkans show up on Germany's radar because the region is unstable, complicated, and refuses to behave. Yugoslavia and Greece were supposed to be secured so Germany's southern flank wouldn't turn into a problem later. Nice, clean logic. The execution, however, went off the rails almost instantly. Germany invaded Yugoslavia in 1941 after a coup flipped the government overnight. Germany responded the only way it knew how: overwhelming force. The country collapsed fast on paper. In reality, that's when the real problem started. Because instead of one enemy, Germany got partisans everywhere, constantly. And partisans don't care about front lines, supply schedules, or your blood pressure. Yugoslav resistance fighters turned the countryside into a never-ending ambush simulator. Rail lines were blown up. Convoys disappeared. Garrisons got attacked by people who melted back into the population 5 minutes later. Greece was similar. The invasion worked, technically, but occupation turned into a long-term headache. Terrain was rough, loyalty was non-existent, and resistance movements refused to stay dead. Every victory just created another problem to babysit. And the last one is the Atlantic Front. I basically made that term myself for the purpose of this video, but we will be referring to the Battle of Atlantic. This front existed because Britain is an island, and islands have a fun weakness. They need stuff shipped to them or everyone starves. Germany looked at this situation and said, okay, what if we just don't let the food arrive? Thus begins the Battle of the Atlantic. Germany's main weapon here was the U-boat, submarines sneaking around, popping up just long enough to sink merchant ships, then disappearing again. Early on, it worked really well. Ships were getting sunk faster than they could be replaced, and Britain was doing a lot of nervous math about how long it could keep going. The problem was that this wasn't a heroic front. No flags being planted, no dramatic charges, just ships vanishing in the dark and sailors hoping the ocean wouldn't explode under them today. Which also meant it turned into a technology race. Radar, sonar, convoys, escort ships, code breaking, whoever figured things out faster survived. Once the Allies cracked German naval codes and improved detection, the tables turned hard. U-boats started getting hunted instead of doing the hunting. Suddenly, going out to sea meant a very good chance of not coming back. Germany kept building submarines, but losing trained crews faster than they could replace them. The Atlantic Front didn't have a single big victory moment. It was just pressure. Constant, boring, lethal pressure. And once the Allies won it, everything else became possible. Troops, tanks, fuel, all of it crossed the ocean because this front was secured. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll get back for the new World War II content. Also, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks.